Hey there, Fellowship family. Welcome to your one-stop shop for all things church life. I'm Mark Francis, once again, your host for today. This is going to be a fun conversation here for this Fellowship Family podcast. I'm excited because it's going to get a chance to dive deeper into a story of what God has done in the life of Fellowship Bible Church and in the life of another church. And I have a familiar face and then maybe an unfamiliar face with you. Ben, you've been around for a while, but I'm going to introduce you first. This is Pastor Ben Santamaria. How are you?
Doing okay.
So give us the one little greeting in Spanish. Here, say something.
Bienvenidos a este podcast. Dios les bendiga.
Beautiful. Love it. You can do that all day long. Yes. And this is, we use a lot of acronyms around here at Fellowship Bible Church. Right. FBC is one. The other one for you is IBHW.
Right.
And that stands for?
Iglesia Bautista Hispana Winchester.
And that is the church that you are a pastor of.
Yes.
And we're going to hear the story of what God has done with that church. And I've got over here to my right, you're all watching left, Pastor Scott Santmier, pastor of local outreach here at FBC. You've been on many times, and we've shared what God is doing with local outreach in the community several times. But this is going to be a story that goes back in time.
It does.
For a long time, of how God has led elders and our church to desire to plant churches. Give us just a quick summary of what a church plant looks like from our Fellowship Bible Church perspective.
Yeah, really, from our perspective, it's a group of individuals who, specifically, this group of individuals, the people group was folks who spoke Spanish. So not something that we sought out at the start, but it's how the Lord led us. But that church plan is we're reaching out to a group of folks who probably wouldn't come through our doors. And being that they all spoke Spanish and most of us don't, most likely they wouldn't come. So
that's a pretty good, easy explanation for this story. So
yeah,
Ben, I'm going to turn to you. Give us a quick background of where you grew up.
Yep.
What led you to this area, and even just a little bit of story of like what God has done in your life.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah.
My full name is Benjamin Santamaria Ramirez. That's probably something you never heard.
Okay, I'll remember that.
I was born in Mexico City, and grew up in Mexico City. Got married in Mexico City, and so my life was in Mexico, in Spanish. Somewhere along the line, I learned how to speak English, even though I didn't need it in Mexico, but I learned about it. And I was born in a Christian family, so all I knew my whole life was going to church. So the most difficult part for my life was to realize that even though I've been going to church all my life, I needed Christ. Somehow I couldn't understand that, I haven't done anything wrong. I probably attended church 6 days a week since I was born. And so when somebody talked to me about salvation, I will go like, yeah, I accept the Lord, but, I couldn't really understand what that meant. In the church I was growing up, I went to the altar dozens of times.
Lots of altar calls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every time they call, I'll go up. But, it took some time for the Lord. And the Lord was so gracious. He allowed me to start playing music when I was 13, already from a stage and recording and traveling and doing a lot of music throughout my teenager years. So that meant that I didn't have a chance to misbehave, if you would, because I was busy for the Lord. And then little by little, I understood what it meant to be saved, what it meant to need the Lord, and understand grace and all together. And so by the time I understood that, I reached a point where I said, Lord, do with my life whatever you want to do. It was just a point blank decision. Just do whatever you want to do. And so the Lord moved us to the U.S. through my work. The company I was working for, they moved us to the U.S. They did everything for us. From the move, from the paperwork, visa, passport, everything. So when I came to the U.S., our family came to the U.S., we didn't really know what the Hispanic community was going through to be here, because we came pretty much with the red carpet, if you would. So we were attending a church in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a huge church, probably 3,000, 4,000 members, but it was Afro-American.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
So that's a unique culture
Very
shock
unique.
right there.
Very unique.
Yeah.
And we were really, really pale in there. It was, so the pastor there asked me to start teaching them, to take some Sunday school classes and start teaching them. I didn't feel comfortable. My English is not that, and I never thought I could teach Bible or anything such. So in my mind, I was just a musician. And then he says, well, what about if you teach us Spanish? I couldn't say no. How could I say no? And so through that, the Lord opened my heart to understand that where he wanted me to go, to be a pastor, a teacher. And once it clicked, once I understood, okay, so I think, Lord, this is what you want for me. Then our company moved to Northern Virginia. We were in Reston, and that's where we started attending the first Hispanic congregation. And that's when I started seeing the need, how the Hispanic community lives, how the culture is so different, even though we're in the same country. One thing is to attend an English church, even though you are Hispanic, you go to the Anglo church. And another thing is to understand the culture of the church that you are attending. So I understood that through our passes for that church. And then on 2011, I got laid off from that company that moved us over here. So I faced my first time looking for a job in the U.S. without not knowing how that worked. We're like, oops, what am I gonna do? And the Lord somehow find a way to move us to Front Royal. And that's where pretty much our paths started getting closer and cross by.
Let me pause your story there, because I'm curious. You keep referencing culture, the Hispanic culture in America.
Yes.
So you've bounced from Atlanta to Reston to then Front Royal. What are the differences and what are the similarities? Because I want to get around to where you can educate our audience of what's the culture here in the Winchester area.
Right.
But what have you experienced around the country that's similar?
Well, it's very interesting. In Atlanta, Georgia, where we lived, everybody says greetings to everybody. Doesn't matter where you are, everybody goes, hey, how are you doing? Everywhere, We went to Reston, nobody talks to you. Sure, the traffic is crazy, It's an extremely fast life. And so we moved to Front Royal, and our daughter, Ashley, for a couple of years, she decided to attend a church in D.C. Because she said that everywhere I look, I just see fields, cows, horses. Where did you,
Where'd you move us?
How did we end up here?
Yeah.
It is a totally different culture, totally different environment. And and on top of that, the Hispanic community that comes here doesn't really comes with the idea of embracing a new culture. They're actually looking for the same products that they had in their country. They looking to celebrate the same familiar days that they used to have, that sort of thing. So that automatically creates a little bit of separation on what do we do as a
interesting.
culture.
Not really looking to synthesize into our community, but to say, this is who I am, this is my identity,
Absolutely.
is my culture,
Yeah.
and to distinguish themselves that way.
Totally.
Is that still similar here in the Winchester area?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one example, if you would, you probably remember Walmart a couple of years ago, there was no Hispanic aisle, you know. But now you have to have just a dedicated aisle for our products, which, quite frankly, if you go through it, you have beans here, you have beans over there. They're the same thing, you know. But no, I got to buy the ones that are from my country because probably tastes better.
Interesting.
They're the same. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Scott, I'll turn your way. And, around this time frame, 2011, 12, 13, 14, leading up there, FBC did not plant a church yet. There was little rumblings in amongst kind of where is God leading us. We did have a couple of Spanish-speaking attendees at FBC at that time who met in the building. Walk us through kind of what that transformation looked like.
Yeah. So in 2012, I actually invited a dozen guys to come together for a season of prayer about church planning. And just I gave them kind of a list of things to be praying about, and after a couple months we'd get back together and we'd talk about what the Lord laid on their heart. And to a man, everyone said, so why aren't we already planning a church? That was the overall, why are we not already doing this? Because we see throughout Scripture that we're called to multiply. God is a sending God, and we haven't gone anywhere. So that was already in the move. So I took that back to the elders and say, okay, this is where, this is just a smattering of men that I've asked to pray for this. Why aren't we planting a church? So kind of placing those seeds in the ground of church planting already. The folks that we already had here that were part of, they had their own kind of basically a Bible study, a Spanish-speaking Bible study. And when I say Spanish-speaking, that's their only real commonality, and Ben can talk a little bit about this. He has numerous people from different countries coming to his church. They all have different cultures from different countries. The only similarity for some of them is that they speak Spanish, and even some of that Spanish doesn't make sense to everybody. So it's very loosely knit. When we lump everybody together as Hispanic, that's really kind of it's a bucket we can put it in, but it's not a very good one for that. So we at the same time, for local outreach, we decided we need to kind of focus in an area and not spread ourselves a mile wide, but to come together and to figure out where the best places to put our resources are. So with all of our research, the Corals Elementary School District at the time was the poorest district in the area. And in fact, at the time, it was the poorest district in Virginia. So that was the area that we decided, okay, we're going to put our energies and focuses in this area. Later on, we learned that 65% of the households in that area are Spanish speaking. So it wasn't like we sought it out or even thought through that. It just happened to be
Didn't
that
even
district.
have to leave town to potentially find an opportunity for
Didn't even have to leave town.
a plant.
Yeah. Didn't have to go too far to, again, find a place and a people group that wouldn't come here. So we didn't have to go too far for that.
So once God laid that on our hearts here as a church, then what were the next steps that were taken? Because there's going to be some merging of stories here, but there's some cool things that happen along the way.
Yeah, so we started by asking the school, how can we help? And the principal at the time, she was brand new in the school, and she said, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how you can help. So we ended up starting a few reading groups within the school, and we kept asking, okay, what are the things that what do you need? And one day I was actually in the office, and I asked that question, again, how can we help? And there in the office is a first grader translating for her mom. Because mom doesn't speak English, but the first grader does. And in the midst of that, the principal says, have you ever taught an ESOL class? And I said, no, but I'm willing to learn. So we ended up starting an ESOL class that met at the school in the evenings for adults, for those parents. At the same time, we would offer childcare and homework help with the more elementary age kids. So that was the beginning of pulling some Hispanic folks together, again, around language and specifically learning English. So that was the beginnings of kind of gathering that pool of people together. At the same time, Ben was in Stevens City trying to pull together a pool of people there.
So Ben, you got laid off.
Yes, I got laid off.
And you're in front royal.
Yes.
And your family's like, what am I doing here? Yes.
Exactly. We were renting a place in Winchester, but I was driving all the way to from Royal to work. And the first thing we did, we tried to find a Hispanic church where to belong to, and that was the very first indication that the Lord needed to plant a Bible-based church in the area, because we couldn't get into anyone. Their practices, their theology, it was just totally all over the place. So on my way to work, right there in the dinosaur land, I guess, there was a Baptist church.
Yes.
Anglo Baptist Church.
Yep. Dinosaur Land, that corner intersection there, 522. Yep. Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so it just kind of just, I saw it. I'm like, well, that's where we're going to be meeting, you know. That's going to be our home church. And we got in there, and Pastor Mike opened his arm really nicely. And we will have a few Hispanics that will show up every now and then. But they will leave really quickly. Everything was in English. They couldn't understand anything. So Pastor said, why don't you open a service in Spanish just for these people? It wasn't even, plant a church. It's just one of the services. So we decided to make it a Saturday. Just make it for the Hispanic folks and bring it in. And that's how everything started. You know?
What year, what time frame are we talking?
We're talking about August 2013.
Okay. So August 2013, you're starting to at least do some church services in a Baptist church.
Yes.
In Stephen City near Dinosaur Land.
Yes.
How many people then started attending?
We became about 30 people. It was a nice group of 30, give or take.
So how did God lead you and show and connect you to Fellowship Bible Church?
Well, that church was renting the building, and so eventually they purchased a building in Middletown. So we moved with them to Middletown, and turns out that Middletown, with all the historical places that they have over there, and there is a lot of police activity there, and the Hispanic didn't like that. So out of those 35 that we went down to 8, and that is including my family. So we were only 5 in the congregation.
Wow. So people just stopped going because they thought there were too many police around.
Yeah, we had one lady that the husband will drop her off at the gas station, and she will walk to church because he will say, I'm not driving through this town.
Wow.
Just like that. So eventually the Lord put in my heart a question. What if Pastor Mike says, forget it, we're going to shut down this thing because, it's not working. So that question, it was really heavy on my heart. What am I going to do? Even though we only have 5, what am I going to do with these 5? So that I just started looking around. What am I going to do? I reached out for the Baptist convention to see if they can help us out. So I just started branching around to see what I can do. And one morning, Scott Santmier went to that church to give us a talk to the men group that we met over there. So that's how I met him.
So it was actually Scott McManigal.
McManigal.
Scott
Yes.
I got that wrong.
Yes, that's okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it wasn't you.
Right.
The other Scott.
Scott McManigal's neighbor,
Yes.
John, invited Scott to come to a men's meeting at the Stephen City Church, and
Middletown.
Or it was in Middletown at that point.
Yeah.
And that is when Scott met Ben for the first time, and as the rest of it would say, it was history from there. But at the same time, we were thinking, okay, we have this group of people coming to this ESOL class, and we're looking at expanding that possibility. Who's going to lead this? We'd even toyed with the thought of taking someone that we knew from Mexico, who was at a church there, and moving them here.
One of our global church partners.
And moving them here and have them plant the church. But then we realized the expense, the time, how long it would take to get them here was really starting to be a Herculean effort. to do that. So we immediately said, okay, we need to look somewhere else.
Doors started closing one after another
One after the
of FBC pursuing somebody like that.
Pretty quickly.
And then all of a sudden one day, Scott McManigles has an interaction with his neighbor
Yeah.
who says, hey, there's this little church over here. There's this guy.
Yeah.
Come meet up.
Yep.
Right? And so then as you then begin interacting with Fellowship Bible Church, what was God showing you in that time?
Well, a couple of things. I got that question in my heart March 2015. So I started branching around, and I talked to Pastor Mike. I said, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move out of the church, and I'm going to start preparing. I was involved in different ministries there, so I'm going to start preparing people to take over. And we set a day. We said, okay, by October 2015, I'm going to be gone. So we set up a plan for 6 months, and I started actively working on that. And when I met with Fellowship, the first meeting, we only agreed that the Lord had something in his heart for Winchester, for the Hispanic community. That was the first agreement. We didn't sign anything. We didn't do anything. We said, you know what? I think that we are up to something. The Lord wants a Hispanic church in Winchester. That was the first agreement. And then a couple of meetings later and so on, in October 1st, 2015, I became part of the staff of Fellowship. So it was the same time frame that
God had led in your heart that
From the very
October was going to be the time, and he proved himself faithful with
indeed.
that.
As he always do.
It's amazing just looking back to see stories of what God has done. And that's not the only story. So now you are officially a part of FBC's staff.
Yes.
But yet we have to find a location.
Yeah.
Where is this going to be? So
Yeah. Through that whole time, I was taking a day a week to walk through those neighborhoods and pray for those people. And I would invite folks to come and join me in that. So part of that was praying for space, for location that was in that area. And if you've ever driven around that area, it's pretty much just houses and apartments. There's not a lot of commercial space in that district. So that was a big concern. And we started out with the church meeting here at FBC. And again, having folks come here, we knew was going to be kind of a downfall.
We really felt that God was like, you need to be there where the people were living in that Quarles district, in that region. So who remembers how that came to be with the building?
Well, the pressure, the Lord put a pressure on our heart one day, and you don't remember this, but we invited a family to meet with us that Sunday in the basement that we were doing in the basement, and they were in the parking lot, driving around, trying to figure out where to get in the building and where we were, and somebody pulled the fire alarm in the building, so we'll have to.
In the FBC building.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
The morning.
Yep.
And so we all went out, and then we find the people. And they said, well, we were just about to leave because we couldn't figure out how to get in. So that was you couldn't get better indication that we have to have a place. The Lord really shows that we have to have a place where they can really find us. And that's how we started walking around, going around, making phone calls, looking for place. And I don't know how many we visit and took pictures. And
a number of places we looked at were downtown, and even the one was a little too close to town hall.
Yeah, that was a little scary.
Yeah, it was just a little too close to town hall. And again, we eventually found this space on South Loudon Street.
And just the way that God used that opportunity to have an owner of a building allow you to rent and do the modifications to a building to turn into a church is near miraculous in the location that is walking distance for many, many people.
Absolutely.
And that happened in 2016.
Just blocks from Quarles Elementary School.
Yeah. So now we're in a building.
Yes.
Let's pause this story because I like teasing people a little bit here because there's more to the story. Now that we have set the groundwork of what God did behind the scenes leading up to the church coming into existence, paint a picture for the need in the community. You alluded to it a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit deeper of how you've experienced different kind of Hispanic churches,
Right.
different kind of theologies, and you've more than alluded to the fear that people live in, not even wanting to drive by an area that they know police are, or be at a church near a town hall. What is going on behind the scenes in the Hispanic community that we don't know about?
Yeah, there are many things that we see them. The American people see them, and they're really just, we don't understand these people. But the first thing that you have is a bunch of people from lots of countries. Everybody says, "Oh, you are Hispanic, so you are from Mexico." That is not true.
Yeah, right.
That is. So you have many people from many countries that are coming to this area, trying to make a living with the purpose of sending money back, because every single one of them left family behind. And so one thing that we see, we patronize them too much. We have walked into places where the only furniture that you see is a folding table with some folding chairs, and you immediately think, these people is so poor, we gotta help them out. And they say, wait a minute, we don't want to spend money here. We want to send our money back to our country. So we are just happy with what we have. Some of them work 3 jobs because that's all what they come here to do, to work. So that's one of the biggest needs that they have. They come here for money. And then the culture of the Hispanic culture is family oriented. You may have a lot of people from other countries that they're really good living alone. Not the Hispanics. They have to have family. So then you become with the fact that they have a second family here, another family back there. Then they start having kids here, and then the gap in the generation and in the language start right away. The kids learn English. The parents don't speak English. They are hardly at home because they're always working. And so you have a big gap in the generation. You need to reach to that generation. And that's the biggest difficulty that we face. We call ourselves a Hispanic church, but half of what we do it in English because of that generation. We have to reach out to them. We have to embrace them and make sure that we keep that family together. In other churches, perhaps, they do split the congregation. If you speak English, you go to that room. If you speak Spanish, you go to that room. We try to keep them together as long as we can, because the family is very important for the community.
It's almost like there is a continual ESOL class occurring within church. If you're saying that you're doing both Spanish and English to reach out to each generation,
absolutely,
that's fascinating. To where you are, yes, a Hispanic or Spanish-speaking church, but yet you're doing both.
Yeah, we have to.
That makes it challenging.
It is very challenging, and as the kids grow and they get out of high school, it becomes another challenge. What are these kids going to choose? They're gonna embrace the Hispanic, heritage. They're gonna go and say, "I'm a Hispanic. I'm gonna try that," or they're gonna just flip, and they're gonna be ashamed of saying that they speak Spanish. Because that happens, and we've seen it. So there's many challenges in the community.
So why the fear then? What's going on there where people are scared to interact with police or government or white people even?
I don't want to go too deep into that one, but news networks, they're to blame on a big scale. Let's say the conservative news that you have everywhere in the U.S., they don't have Hispanic channels, but the leftist, if you would, networks, they do. So the parents that don't speak English, they're gonna watch this kind of news, And so all they know is fear. You know, they're gonna come and get you. It's a bus waiting for you to send you back. You know, perfect example. The ESOL, when the ESOL ended, was the Monday after President Donald Trump got elected. We have 26 families. The next Monday, nobody showed up. It was just like that. Oh no! So we went to knock at the doors, and the parents will send the kids, and they will open just a little bit. Is your daddy? What do you want?
Wow.
Yeah, just like that. They live in fear, and then the theology that they get at church, and that's the biggest need, is a theology of fear. You know, you sin, that's it. You go to hell, just like that. And so trying to get them out of that fear, try to get them out of that abuse that they have at church, abuse at work. Many of them won't have documents to work, legal documents. So they will find one opportunity to work, and because they cannot change, they cannot just apply for another job anywhere. They will be abused at the workplace as well because they know they cannot leave. And so it's a community that is living constantly in fear, being hurt, being abused.
So you're working through these emotions of people in your congregation that are coming, exposing them to the gospel, exposing them to love and grace and mercy and all those things. Is there a specific story that over the years that you've seen God change people or a specific person in your congregation?
Absolutely. Familia Tranquilino. I met this guy at work probably 2011. He was probably abusing substance, probably just all the time that he was not at work. Put it that way. He was as stubborn, as a rebel as you may, I mean, you name it. And of course, I'm talking to him, inviting him to come to church, to know Christ, and he will just won't take it. I mean, he's just no way. One day, I found him at quarrels. It turns out that his family, his children were attending quarrels. So I found him in quarrels. That would be 2016 probably. I find him in there, and I said, hey, we're having a movie night. We do movie night on Halloween. So we're having this movie night, family night. Will you come? And he said yes. He never said yes to that. So okay, well, got it. We got the movie night, and I was embarrassed that my congregation did not show up, but his family showed up. So the whole thing was just for him.
Wow.
And the Lord touched his heart that night, and he just turned around big time. He's one of our leaders at the church today, and his entire family has come to Christ, been baptized and everything. It was just the way the Lord meant every step for every person that is at the church is just amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Scott, I'm going to turn to you. Let's pick up the story now. So when we talk about a church plant, there's an involvement of Fellowship Bible Church in this church. So this is the first one for FBC. And so we're navigating new waters as we're partnering with Ben and a church. What went on behind the scenes for those years, and what ultimately is the goal? So why are we here today having this conversation? That's kind of two big questions there.
Yeah, two big questions. So partnering with a church plant, we have some thresholds that we're looking to cross before that church is no longer a plant, becomes its own entity unto itself. So some of those thresholds are having elders and leaders to lead the church. Another is that they're financially stable enough to keep the church going. And then ongoing ministries that are self-replicating. So those are some of the thresholds that we look at. So for the Hispanic church, they've hit all those thresholds. So it's kind of like, sending that kid off to college. They've grown up, they've checked all the boxes, and now we're kind of pushing them into standing on their own 2 feet and living that life that we have been hoping for them the whole time. since day one, our hope is that they would be a standalone church, and that they would be self-governing and self-regulating, and that they would be interacting and outreaching into their own communities. And that's where we're at today. So we're standing in that space.
Those interacting with, just touching on some of those things, Ben, I'll turn to you. The development of elders, the financial stability, the interacting and engaging community, whether it be doing VBSs or movie nights like that. Just, I want to touch on a couple of those. Just, you mentioned the story of the guy who is now a key leader in your church. How has God developed leaders along the way?
Well, we have the need, we have the goal, but we have the need. Beyond the goal, it was a need to have somebody governing the church along myself. It wasn't many of the needs that we had. I will bring it to the elders here. Try to explain the best that I can what we wanted, but it wasn't the same that they understood. They're like, we don't do those things, and well, but that's what we do, and so that was a need to have a body governing the church with me. So what I decided to do, and I guess the Lord put that on my heart, to teach the elder classes for a year to every single man at church. So we got it, every man. We said, this class is going to be for everybody, every Saturday for a year. And so we went through it. We did all the training. And at the end, we start praying. Okay, so now that you know what it means to be an elder, let's see whose heart God is touching to become an elder. And that's how the Lord bring Pascual and Rafael as an elders of the church. They said, you know what, I think the Lord is talking to me. But it was an effort to educate the whole church. One of the efforts that we have done is to de-educate, as they come from different countries, different churches, different backgrounds theologically, and de-educate them, re-educate them, how to interpret the Bible and apply the Bible correctly, I guess. So that was a whole period of a year just to go through training, very serious training, and then letting the Lord touch the heart that needed to be touched. So that's how the training has happened, every single step.
So talk then about the financial independence.
Yeah.
How has God blessed your church, and what do you see the congregation impacting, just with, because you're saying the culture is to save a lot of money and send it back home and live on basic means.
Absolutely.
And here there's a biblical call to give and to be a part of a church body and to help support that. So how have you seen that work together?
It is amazing to see that the church, in terms of numbers, have been the same. We haven't grown exponentially. We haven't, we don't have 2,000 people there. We have pretty much the same amount of people, about 60 that we met. And some, as many churches happens, they leave and the Lord brings another family the next Sunday. And, our finance has been pretty steady for the last 3 years. Pretty much the same average. It hasn't changed for the last 3 years. So how the Lord is touching their hearts, I'm not really sure. But we have our first test with Jordan Haspe. We sent him to Colombia as a missionary.
How long ago was that?
2019.
Yeah.
2019. So I talked to the congregation. So Jordan has finished his internship, and he's pretty much loose. So he has no support. He has nowhere to go, and we have a really good opportunity to support a ministry, from our own. But let's understand that the day that they don't bring our offerings, he has no means to survive. So we did some pleas, and everybody said, well, I can do $50 every month. Okay, whatever you can. So once we got all that together, we said, Jordan, this is what we can give you every month. All right? He says, okay. And that was the first test. Can we sustain somebody, full-time ministry, from our church? And it has happened since then. We've been we have been able to increase his monthly support throughout the years, significantly for him. And so that was where we realized, you know what? I think the Lord can support this church as well. And so we started looking at the finance and how we're doing. Well, for the last 3 years, honestly, the only support that we got financially from fellowship was my support. but everything else, the church paid for it, and so we saw the Lord was faithful in that area as well, without having me to preach every Sunday about giving,
Right. Yeah. Nobody wants to do that. Yeah.
No.
Nobody wants to listen to that.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then the last, you mentioned a few different things, Scott, but the other is just kind of the replication of ministries or discipleship components of exponentially growing and reaching out into the community.
Yeah.
Share just a couple examples about that. I mean, I know VBS is one. Other opportunities of how you see the congregation really pursuing and having a heart for growing the community and bringing people in.
VBS is a really, I love that example because we changed the concept of VBS. Our congregation is working families. So ask them to be off for 3, 4, 5 days during the morning to celebrate VBS. It was impossible.
Yeah.
It was no way. Asking to have who's going to serve during those hours, it was totally impossible. How do we embrace the community in a way that is meaningful for them, that they can actually come? So we decided to make it a summer camp, and that is every July. We do every Friday of July. That's our VBS. And then we realized that VBS typically goes all the way to 5th grade, sometimes 6th grade, but typically stops on 5th grade. So we said, so what do we do with our teenagers? How do we embrace our teenagers? So this year will be the 3rd year that they develop the VBS theme, pets, mascots, songs, everything.
They're creating their own curriculum.
They created their own curriculum.
Yeah.
I blessed it, but
Sure. Got to watch what teenagers try to come up with, right?
Yeah, you have to. But yeah, they do it, and they do their own drawings and everything. So they normally start in January. So by now I already have the themes for this year, the songs and everything, and we just go through the motions. And then when VBS comes, we don't do nothing.
Yeah.
They lead the congregation, they lead the classes, they lead everything.
Yeah.
And so that's how we embrace the community, how we embrace everybody, and how we reproduce. Teenagers typically after when they turn 15, we invite them to be assistants at the Sunday school class, so they get an exposure how to teach and that kind of thing. So we try to get them engaged as much as we can.
That's great.
Our worship band, kids 12, 13 years old, all of them learning music with us in church, in the house. We try to develop from within as much as we can.
That is a lot to praise God for.
Certainly is.
I mean, it's all the work of Him. Nothing that we could have ever invented or created.
Absolutely.
On the FBC side, would you have imagined that? What's next of our partnership, and what does this really look like, and how can we pray for you, Ben, and Scott? Kind of what can we as a church really do to continue to support them? Because we don't. Again, this is a celebration, but not again a split. So, what's the continual desire here for our relationship?
Yeah, and in the church planning world of FBC. We are looking at and in the process of creating a church planters residency. So people will ask me all the time, so where's the next church plant going to be? And I happily say, I don't know. But really we don't want to focus on the where. We want to focus on the who. And that was one of the things that we learned with this church plant was the who, Ben, was way more important than the where. So we want to focus our energies on training and deploying the who. So we're in the midst of creating this curriculum for church planters. It's a residency, so they'll be right here on the campus, and eventually we will have and this, at least in my thinking, a network of churches that have graduated, much like IBHW, and that network will get together on occasion as well, not only to celebrate what God's doing, but to share ideas and thinking and resources and even swapping pastors for a weekend because they go on vacation or they go on mission trips.
Sometimes.
And
Sometimes
they need somebody to fill in.
Yeah.
So IBHW would be the first church of that network.
Yeah. So how can we pray for you, Ben, and the congregation?
Absolutely. If we go with this analogy of the 18 years old, and you probably remember when you were 18.
Kind of. Thought I knew everything, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing, right?
I try to forget a lot about that.
Yeah,
I know.
Right.
And you never thought about retirement when you were 18.
Yeah.
But we need to start thinking about the next age of the church. What are we gonna do when all our kids only speak English? So who's gonna be the next leader that's gonna take over that English-speaking congregation that is part of IBHW, but it's an English congregation? So what are we gonna do to have a consistent growth spiritually, but also keep the family together? That's really the key elements that we need to watch for. Not as much as getting the building filled of people, but rather how do we keep that community as a family, even though the kids are growing, they're gonna go to college, they're gonna have different ideas. So how do we embrace them as a church?
How are you preparing and deploying? Right?
Exactly.
Because it's almost like you're saying it's okay to say that you're in a 60-person, 70-person kind of cycle of seasons of people attending the church. So you're preparing, you're deploying, and so how are you building to the next generation?
That's correct.
Building to the future, maybe a church plant yourself,
Absolutely.
potentially. So there's all kinds of things of like just seeing what's on the horizon for that.
As a matter of fact, we have a meeting that we do every week in Charlestown, West Virginia. So that will be our next church planting in there, But if I go there, who takes care of this one? Or who do I send over there? That's deploying for the next generation. That's really the next thing on our heart. How do we make that sustainable and successful as this story that we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, Scott, Ben, thank you guys for
Thank
sharing
you.
the story. And again, the work is not done yet, but it's just neat to always take a moment, pause, look backwards, see what God has done.
Amen.
To know that He's faithful, and we can have confidence in Him in the unknown of what's going to happen in the future, looking to Him to not find the where, but the who.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you guys for watching and listening and being a part of today's episode. Just keep in mind that this is a podcast called Fellowship Family here at FBC, where we want to share stories. And this is just one example of a story that can be shared. So we want to hear from you as well. So remember that you can always go to fbcva.org/podcast to submit your story or questions so we can get a chance to be encouraged by what's happening in your life. And remember, we also have the other podcast channels, whether it be Sermon Spotlight or the Global Church podcast. So tune into those, subscribe to those, and tell your friends so they can learn more about what God is doing in FBC and around the world. Well, thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we chat again, let's let Christ be the focus of our lives each and every day.